Right, okay. Let's bring Whisper in, and then maybe we can tell everybody what's happening. Hello, Whisper.
Hello. Thank you
Can
so
you
much
hear
for
me?
having
Can you
me.
see me?
Yes, I can hear you and see you. How about can you hear and see me? Ooh.
Yes, I can. I can. It's so lovely to see you. Is Jemima joining us today?
Yes, she will be. I sent her all the updated links and everything. She is wrapping up the very end of her work day, so she might be a
Uh,
few minutes late. So
oh,
be with
I
you
feel,
soon.
I feel, I feel cheeky for being like, hey, finish work and come straight to the stream and speak to me about really difficult things for an hour. So I do appreciate the both of you taking time out of your days to come and join us today as the last
Yeah, of
talk of the
course.
stream. I
I
can't believe
know.
it. We're at the end. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, what a trooper you've been.
Oh gosh, it's gone really, really quickly actually. But enough about all of that. We've done a talk. I've released it on the Cult Vault podcast. You have your
Yes.
own podcast, and both yourself and Jemima are very outspoken about your experiences. So there's a chance that everybody that's watching already knows who you are, Whisper. But just in case they don't, could you please introduce yourself to the listeners?
Yes, absolutely. My name is Whisper James, and I am the founder and co-host of Butterflies and Bravery podcast. I was born in and raised in the Children of God cult and was able to escape in my early mid 20s with my kids. And we started the podcast about 3 years ago now, actually, similar to your birthday. And we started similar timing, and we've started, you know, telling our stories and talking to a lot of different people. It's been amazing. It's been incredible. So
Well, Jemima's just shown up at the time where
yay!
I would say, thank you so much for your introduction, Whisper. And hello, Jemima.
Hi.
Can you see us? Can you hear us?
Yes, yes, I can. It was having a hard time connecting, but it's good now. I can't see. Oh, yeah, there you are. I just had to figure out how to use this program.
You've just
I've
finished
been
your
at
work
work all
day?
day. Yeah, I'm still at work, actually, but
Well, thank
I
you
made
so much
everybody up.
for thank you for jumping on the call after finishing a day of work. I really appreciate it. It's like going from one job to another.
I don't consider this work at all. This is like my fun and my secret therapy.
I just asked Whisper to introduce herself. Jemima, just in case any of the listeners who are tuning in have not come across your work before, would you please introduce yourself to the listeners?
Sure. My name is Jemima, and I am 50 years old. I was born into the Children of God cult, and I was in it until I was 27 years old, and I left a single mom with a 2-year-old child. Actually, I didn't leave. I got excommunicated. I try to be really clear about that. Yeah, I got kicked out for smoking pot. I call it my freedom weed now. But yeah, so I've been out for 23 years now, and I live in Idaho with my husband, and my daughter and her boyfriend are currently moving in this area too and trying to get set up. So that's super cool. And then I'm part of the
Uh,
Butterflies and Bravery podcast, of course.
yeah, yeah, just that small other thing that I do as well. Just this amazing podcast where we speak to all these amazing guests and share our own stories.
Yeah, yeah. It's been a real
So
privilege.
you both grew up in the same group. You did know each other. You were friends within the group, and then
Yeah.
you both left in your 20s at different times, both with your children.
Yes.
Do
Actually, quite
you
close. Like our times when we left were within a year. We both we
Yeah.
both left right around the same time.
Yeah.
did you immediately reconnect after both leaving?
Yeah, yeah,
We'd already been pretty much
yeah.
in pretty good communication at that time. The rules had, changed a lot over the years, and by that time it wasn't like illegal to call your friends, not like earlier in the group. So yeah, we had actually been in contact because we were both in the States with our kids, and so even within the group we were in touch for those last couple years. It was a few years that we weren't super close, but
Well, we were close, just not in touch.
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Close in spirit.
Most likely by design as well, because this particular group is very good at separating people and from putting people in places around the globe that where no one else knows where you are. And I mean, most people listening are probably aware of this group, but Whisper, just in case anybody that's tuning in is not too familiar with the Children of God, is there an overview of the group that you can give us?
Yeah, the Children of God was formed late 60s, came out of California, came out of the Jesus Revolution, hippie revolution. It started out very much essentially as a Christian movement. But as time went on, that the belief system, the practices, and the teachings all got farther and further and further convoluted. Essentially, it was a pseudo-Christian, apocalyptic, isolative, and sex cult. The leader Berg and his wife, who is the current leader of the cult, Karen Zerby, promoted that all things are lawful, include, especially when it came to sex. So that included children, with adults, incest, the works. It was pretty ugly. They also believed in very strict punishment. There was a lot of abuse from physical, emotional, spiritual. When I say isolated, we were not allowed education. We were not allowed secular music, secular influences, secular schooling. Most of us were homeschooled uh, just by our parents up till around 6th to 7th grade education at the most.
And there's a time I recall from you sharing your experiences with us before, where the two of you became close as children within the movement, and then you were separated. I wondered, Jemima, if you could just talk the listeners through what happened, what led up to that, and what happened afterwards in terms of you finding one another somehow.
Yeah, it's a funny story actually. So we met in Chiang Mai, which is in northern Thailand. They had sent not all, but quite a few teenagers up there in preparation for opening their training center in Bangkok. So Whisper and we didn't get a lot of chance to talk in the first week or so, but after I think it was about 2 weeks, we went on a trip to the park, and everybody was going to go on this walk, and both her and I were not feeling the greatest. So we were I think she had twisted her ankle, and I was having a woman thing or something like that. It was one of those I don't want to go take a 5-mile walk right now. So we got permission somehow. I'm still wondering how actually to stay and just sit by this bridge and this little stream in this beautiful park. And we ended up there for 2 hours or so. And we just started talking, and it was instantly oh my God, I love you.
Yeah.
I don't know. We just really hit it off. And by the end of that conversation, we were inseparable.
Mm-hmm.
And so they put us on the train. What?
The next day, the train. We were traveling down to Bangkok the next day. That's what the event was for, to say goodbye to us.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
See,
yeah,
I didn't
yeah.
remember that. Thank you for that detail.
I was 14, she was 15. Like it was a long time ago.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So they put us on this overnight train down to Bangkok. Her and I, and it was just a couple people, not very many. And everybody went to sleep, and her and I stayed up all night with one of the other teenagers talking, and we just clicked so much. So as soon as we arrived in Bangkok, they were like, "Oh no, you guys are friends? Mm-mm. Okay,
Within
opposite
24
rooms."
hours. Within 24
Yeah,
hours of
we were
arriving.
like instantly separated. For a long time, we weren't allowed to talk or sit next to each other or anything. Eventually, they were like, okay, fine, you guys, but you can't be like special to each other. You just have to act normal, like everybody else, type of thing. Anytime that we would get like super excited to see each other or something, we would get in trouble. Yeah, and then they separated us multiple times. They couldn't keep us apart.
No.
And the panel topic today, I've chosen this specifically because I feel as if your experiences and your ability to share your experiences with the wider public is quite a special thing, and it's a very powerful thing, especially when the two of you come together and fill in the blanks for each other. I think that's like that speaks to your friendship completely. The panel is titled "Building Your Life After Leaving a Cult," and I mentioned before Whisper came into the talk that it's not rebuilding your life after leaving a cult; it's building your life, because this is a movement that both of you were born and raised in. There's no there's no previous experiences or identity to recall on. There's no family to go back to if you decide to leave this group, or if you run away, or if you're disfellowshipped, or if you're excommunicated. It is leaving a group that your entire existence has been within and having to navigate something completely new. And that in itself is such a wild concept. Chris Shelton said earlier in this stream, it's like going to another country and having to learn all the language and the customs and the rights and the wrongs, and just your way around as well. So I wondered if I could ask both of you what those experiences were like. Jemima, how was it that you came to be excommunicated, and what were the next steps for you?
Well, we had moved back to the United States, my friend and I. The goal was to raise money to go to Africa. Then we kind of were just in a very small situation. It was just us and one other couple, so it was just four people, and we had to basically get outside jobs, like outside of the cult, which none of us had ever had a job outside of the cult because that was basically forbidden, only with very special exceptions. So we got a job. I actually had a couple of jobs before, like in the maybe 6 months or so, but then I got a job. And some of my friends were like, "Oh, hey, let's hang out." I was like, "Yeah, I got a jacuzzi and a pool at my apartment complex. We'll just go and chill, bring some beer or whatever." So they brought marijuana, and and so I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah." So I went back, and I was like they could tell that I was, inebriated. I had never really smoked before, except for maybe once or twice. So I was really like just blazed, like inoperably blazed. Uh, that's funny. Yeah, yeah. So they reported on me. They were like kids of the leaders. One of them was like a son of a leader or something. And so he decided to report on me. And then I got a letter from the leadership of the American continent telling me that I was excommunicated for 6 months. Originally, I was like, okay, fine, I'll just do my excommunication and go back. But then during my excommunication, I actually was in contact with some other former members, and I started learning things about the cult that I didn't know. And that kind of sealed the deal with yeah, I'm not going back.
Whisper, I mean, how do you not crack up at everything Jemima says? You have such a way of telling stories that I am, and sometimes we're talking about really serious stuff, and you still have that humor coming through. And I know that we spoke about this in terms of it being almost like a coping strategy, but
100%.
it's infectious. You have like a laugh that makes me want to laugh, and I'm so tired at this point that it's actually making me teary. So I think that's such a wonderful quality that you have. Whisper, do you just is this just Jemima all the time?
Yeah, we pretty much never stop laughing, even when we're crying.
Oh gosh.
True story.
I remember, so when we first started our podcast, we actually, the initial vision or idea for the podcast was not to specifically like focus only on children of God, born-ins, but it eventually kind of became that way. But the first few interviews that we had, we were interviewing different people with some really pretty serious stories. And some of the feedback that we got in the very beginning, like after like 2 or 3 episodes, people were like, these are really serious stories. Like, I don't know if we can keep up with that. And Jemima and I were both like, yeah, but like, we've just been laughing like the whole time, like even in the very most serious of times, we, almost every single episode, we at least cry once or twice, and then we're also laughing. it's the only way to deal, really.
In terms of your experiences, Whisper, in leaving the children of God, you were not excommunicated.
No. So I grew up overseas. I was an adult when I came to the States for the first time. And so not only like I had the whole culture shock of coming to America, and, and as well as then, for the first time being around people that spoke my language, I actually started understanding things a lot more. But at that point, when I come back to the States, like I was already pregnant, and I ended up having, so the cult does not allow childbirth. Childbirth does not allow does not allow any uh,
Birth
birth control, or
control.
any childcare planning or anything like that. So I had 4 kids within 6 years. So I was just a mom. Like that's the only thing that I was doing. And at the time, like, we weren't allowed to, women were not driving, women, like, we didn't have any power whatsoever. Like, I mean, I like talking about barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen. That was like my whole life for a good space of time there. But it was pretty early on there where I started going like, there is no way. There were definitely a few really, really key moments that I had, where I was just like, I have to get out of here. From the very beginning, like, we struggled. Thailand was, in particular, where we spent our teen years, was one of the more difficult areas, and one of the more difficult institutions that teens were in. So from the beginning, I knew that I didn't fit in, but because I didn't know of any other life, I had no clue. I just, I spent my whole existence, ever since I could even like conceptualize thought, I was wrong. I was a person that just like didn't fit into life, and I was the one who needed to get fixed and changed and all that kind of stuff. So we almost, when the kids were really little, at that point I was already, we had made plans. We were going to leave But my ex met somebody that was still in the cult, that they fell in love with, and so we moved back into a home, and we spent the next 3 years there, and I spent the whole 3 years trying to convince him to leave. If I was who I was today, I would have just been adios, motherfucker. I would have had the kids and been out of there, but I had no idea even like where to start. Like I said, I didn't even drive, let alone know how to open a bank account or anything like that. So we kind of had a bit more of a pretty. When I finally convinced him to leave, we had a bit of a more elaborate escape situation. We bought round trip tickets because you weren't allowed to have any money unless you were going to what's called the mission field. Like we're going overseas to proselytize. And so we told them, and this wasn't a lie. I had a friend who was trying to open an orphanage in Jamaica. So we said, well, we're going to, Jamaica. We're going to fly out to Jamaica. That's going to be our mission field. But we secretly bought round trip tickets so that when our visas ran out in Jamaica, we came back on that flight and started life at that point. We had $200 and 4 little tiny kids, and that's sort of how it started. My ex, because the kids were so little, my ex at the time, like one of the things that I will always forever and ever be grateful to him for was like he worked 2 jobs. Like he would work a job during the day and then come home and I'd have dinner or whatever, and then he would go back out for his second job because I couldn't work. So that's sort of the struggle that we had right at the beginning there. And after a couple of years in New York, we came over to California. We got my ex got a job offer out in California, and that's where we've been ever since. So, but there was so much that we went through. The thing, it's interesting. The person Chris was comparing it to, like coming to another country, without. This is not to say. This is not to make a comparison other than just something similar. I would say it would be like coming to a new country, completely new country, and also like have some type of disability or handicap, because you are like, not only do you not know what's going on around you, know where to start, how to interact with people, but you are also severely disadvantaged in some way. When I went to try to get into college, I got into college. I just went and I made up my high school diploma. I put in that I was homeschooled, and I just made up my high school. What do you call it when they list your
Transcript?
Yeah. So I just made up my high school transcript, all a lie, and just submitted that, and they let me in with that.
Wild thing about homeschooling, though, I don't know. It's so unregulated that I don't think that many people would even bother to try and find out, whether you are being. I mean,
No, I don't think so.
maybe I'm talking too broadly.
Probably if I was, 18, not 20, if I was that age range, they probably would have been like, okay, wait a second. But because I had been overseas, it was pretty. What are they going to check? Hello.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was. But even from there, it's just like you're starting, a 200-meter dash, 100 meters behind everybody else. And that's sort of like what it is like trying to build. So I'm sorry. She's my kid's really wound out.
It's like starting the race at 100 meters behind everyone with a rucksack full of bricks on your back.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Jemima, how did you go about living after you were excommunicated? How did you, where do you even go to, if not just find a job and housing, but also like everything that comes with identification papers, bank accounts? Like, where do you even begin?
It was pretty rough. I got an apartment with my friend that I had previously been living with, because when I was excommunicated, she was like, well, I'm just leaving too then. But she moved out shortly afterwards, and I was completely on my own. I had no idea how to do anything. I mean, I was just like Whisper, I was just learning how to drive. I got my driver's license and my first job when I was 27 years old. And I did the same thing with college too. That's funny. I just wrote that I went to international school in Bangkok, Thailand, and they didn't even check. They're just like, okay, here, take the test. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, they tested me too. That was how they put me in. It's like, okay, entry test.
But yeah, so it was rough. I made a lot of. I mean, I'd say the most difficult part about it is the naivety that comes with, and then on top of it, you've been taught not to think critically, and also that you have this sort of like people are good thing, because that's kind of, like most of your life you've been just like begging. And so I don't know, I just had a very naive, like, oh, people are good, everybody wants to help me thing. I didn't realize that
for you. Yeah.
Yeah, like I didn't realize, I mean, I've taken advantage of so many times, like with cars and jobs and just things like that, that a normal person would have been like, oh my God, no, there's something wrong here. But I had no idea. And I made a lot of bad mistakes with credit card debts and all sorts of things like that, that I just kind of had to learn. And on top of it all, I developed drug problems because I was very, very depressed and getting in abusive relationships, all that kind of, those kind of things, because I didn't really have any self-respect per se.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard to respect yourself when you don't know who you are.
Wow. That's a really powerful thing. How do you go about even, I mean, it's something I suppose comes hand in hand with building a life after leaving a cult. It's who are you? How do you find out who you are? You authentic you inside yourself that is separate to the group. I don't know that you can ever separate yourself completely, because your childhood experiences and, Whisper and Jemima, you two meeting inside the group, are now such important parts to each other's lives. It's another reason why you might not ever be able to fully separate yourself from the group, and the group identity. How do you navigate all of this stuff, Jemima?
It's, to be honest with you, I've only in the last few years, really since we started doing the podcast, and right before that, because we did like a summit sort of thing. We had some guest speakers, and we had put together a big program, and it was actually Whisper put together this amazing sheet about like defining your values, because we both kind of realized that unless you define your values, you don't really know what is important to you. And if you don't know what's important to you, then you don't know who you are. So we felt like defining your values is like one of the first things that you should do. Of course, it took us 25 years, but for anybody that's freshly leaving,
For sure.
like I felt like a lot of finding yourself is figuring out what you like, and like what makes you happy, what makes you feel alive. And it's only in the last few years that I've really even been figuring those things out, because I never thought about something like, oh, what do I like on my hamburger? Or do I even like this kind of gravy? Or do I like this food at all? Sometimes you just eat things or do things because that's kind of the conditioning that you've had, and you don't even question, like, is this me? So it's only been in the last few years that I've just been like, okay, who am I? What do I like? What's my favorite color? What's my favorite food? What's my favorite song? What kind of, and it's difficult to figure all that stuff out, and I'm still doing it, but I feel like doing the podcast has really, really, really helped me, because we get to talk to so many people, and basically each person has their own little life hack, their own little cheat. Like, what got you through? What did you do? What did you learn that was like the biggest turning point? What kept you going? And it's a little bit different for each person. So that's one of the reasons why I still feel so privileged doing the podcast, because we get to talk to all these different people, and each person has like a little different facet of the diamond, so to say, like a little bit of a different perspective. And then they kind of show you their facet, and you're like, oh my God, that's so amazing. Like, I'm still finding things out all the time that just blow my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have to, yeah, I mean, at least for me, like, I know one of the biggest things I had to learn was to be gentle and accepting with myself, and understanding that I don't have anything that I'm pulling from. I don't have a history. I don't have a foundation. We all know, that cults, are trying to strip you down of anything identifying any type of independence, any type of self-thinking, critical thinking, anything like that, opinions. But most people that have joined cults will have a before, at least. But when you are born into the cult, they've gotten you since birth to, make sure that you didn't have any of your own thoughts. You didn't have any of your own opinions. I mean, we were told like how many pieces of toilet paper to wipe our ass with. We were told, like what kind of, we couldn't even get our own clothes. Like we would tell them like, well, I would like to have a dress, and then somebody would go shopping for you and come back, and yeah, we had some really ugly clothes. We had some really ugly clothes come back. And like your grandma's going shopping for you, and that's all you get to wear. But one of the things that, because of that, what they've stripped away from us, being able to find that in yourself again, it's a process, and it's a healing process that everyone's going through at a different stage and a different way, because there's grief involved. You have to mourn, you're processing, you're learning who you are. There's so much involved, and so people are coming at it in so many different ways. But like what Jemima was saying with the podcast that we've seen, and just even with cults actually becoming a much more common and acceptable topic to be discussed, so much more healing is starting to come into being, and it's at our fingertips, because one of my favorite quotes is, the oldest form of community is the oldest form of healing. And that's really where, when you can find other people who have either been through something similar to what you've been through, or if nothing else, accept you completely for what you've been through, you can start seeing like, oh, this is who I am, because I'm different from this person, that even though I love them and I like being around them, I'm different. Instead of everyone was supposed to be the same exact way our whole life. You had to think the same things, like the same things, want the same things. Like, there was never a difference. So just even that community and that connection, and not everybody's ready for that. There's a lot of people who are like, I can't deal with, like an ex-member or somebody who, like, I can't deal with any other born-ins. There's a lot of people who can't do that because of the pain that, they've not yet been ready to process. But that community piece is so huge for really being able to figure yourself out, I think.
Mm-hmm. I read the first instances of somebody asking you if you want to go somewhere and do something, or if you want to go eat particular food, or if you want to go dress in particular shops. And the first time you have the thought of being like, no, and then the first time you vocalize that, no, actually, I don't want to do those things, must be a very bizarre feeling. And then to recognize that you can just do that whenever you want to, must also be a very empowering but bizarre thing after so many years of never having any individual choices. Whisper, something you said that really resonates with me is that when your ex-husband was going to work 2 jobs because you couldn't work, and you'd had 4 babies in the space of 6 years, and you were just a mother, because you in the group you weren't allowed another role, well, I suppose if you were going to look at, available as a sexual partner to, to your husband, and perhaps in some circumstances, whoever else, in some parts of the children of God. But as a mother, it's strange to have your identity, your group identity in the group, and then to have your group identity in the group change to from not a mother to a mother, but still in the realm of the children of God. Because a mother in the group and a mother outside the group in itself, I imagine, are two very different people.
Oh yes, absolutely, absolutely. Well, I mean, the first, and this is experience that we've spoken to, born in after born in after born in, that this is an experience that they had too. But the first time that they held their first kid was like, okay, like now I know everything that was done wrong with me, and that's no matter what.
Wow.
I don't know anything else except that I'm going to make sure that that didn't happen. And even though at the time we were technically in the cult, at that point, I was not raising them whatsoever in any of the cult teachings or any of the cult beliefs, because I was like, absolutely not, it was, I didn't know how to be a mom, but I knew how not to be a mom. And that was sort of where I had to start from. And that was what a lot of us ended up doing. I kind of grew up with my kids in a lot of ways. The good and the bad of it, I mean, I'm sure that I've messed them up in ways that I won't see for many, many years. But at the same time, like, there's a closeness that we have. I've been completely transparent with them about everything, and they come to me about everything as well. So we have a really, really close relationship. And even though there are things that I know I've messed up and things that I haven't done right, and I know for sure I've passed on some trauma, because you can't help that happens. I think we make up for it in the love and the connection and the communication that we have now. So at least I have that. But yeah, it was interesting. And it's only actually just been recently that my kids have all moved out now. And that was a whole other experience, because I was taking care of kids since I could remember. I was running around at 7 years old with my whatever sibling I had at the time, or by the time I was 12, 13, I always was taking care of kids. So I didn't know what it was like to not have to make decisions, not have to make scheduling decisions for anybody else's purpose except for myself. That was a whole experience, and that was just started a couple of years ago. So still discovering.
Jemima, did you feel as though you were also rediscovering motherhood once you had officially decided that you weren't going back after those 6 months of excommunication?
Yes. I same as Whisper. I didn't know what to do, but I knew what not to do. I still like physically disciplined my daughter though, until my husband came along and he was like, "Why are you spanking her?" And I was like, "'Cause she's naughty." And he's like, "You don't spank kids." And I was like, "Oh, okay." Like, what do you do then? Like, there's so many things I look back and I'm like, oh my God, like, how could I have been so just naive and just like no freaking clue. But it's
This is you not exercising the advice that Whisper said before about being gentle to yourself, and recognizing the conditioning that you were subjected to. Here's an example of that, I imagine.
yes, exactly. But I felt the same thing though. As soon as I had my kid, I was like, okay, she is not growing up like me, like period not. That was a huge thing that I was like, okay, nothing that happened to me is happening to her. But it was difficult learning how to also like, how do you make them go to school, and do you get vaccinations or not? Like, there's so many decisions that we didn't have before, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I have all these decisions. Like, what am I supposed to do? It's pretty overwhelming. But I'm also very, very close with my daughter now. And of course, I know I've made plenty of mistakes, but but we do have that very, very close. Like, anything happens that, she calls me right away. Like, she had a fender bender, like, Mom, I had a fender bender. Like, I know if anything ever happens, like, I'm her first phone call. So that's a really, really nice feeling. And I've also been transparent with her from the very beginning. She knows I answer all her questions completely honestly about my past, and I don't try to hide anything from her, because I feel like if she's going to find out someday, and then she's going to be mad at me and feel like she was betrayed. Like, why didn't you tell me? And so, I understand though, everybody has their own decisions and things to make. But for me personally, it was I pretty much just was honest with her from the start about everything.
When you speak to your daughter about those experiences, do you feel as if there is a transference of experience that arms your children against coercive control, helps your children to recognize when they may be subjected to those types of tactics like love bombing and gaslighting?
Oh yes, she's there. I think probably Whisper's children are the same, but she's very aware. She knows she can meet somebody and know their motives, kind of, understand right away, like, okay, there's something wrong with this person. Her sort of character judgment is quite good. And I feel like I really tried to focus on that, like teaching her, don't trust anybody and don't think that other people have your best interest in mind, because that was one of the biggest faults for me. Was I thought other people had my best interest in mind, and I didn't understand not everybody plays by your playbook, and no, you're not the center of their universe. So those were the kind of things that I really tried to make sure that she knew and understood about being an adult.
Yeah. Because growing up in trauma and growing up with CPTSD, that's something that, my kids have seen that in me that's not all just gone, like I still have those lingering, things that I'm continuing to work on. So in a lot of ways, I did put some of that onto them as well. The sometimes the hypervigilance, or especially, the intuition of like reading, being able to read people, that hyper empathy, that hyper sympathy, that type of a thing. But the difference between me and them that I was able to teach them was, you can act on that. You can read somebody and say, ha ha ha, I know what you're doing and I'm not going to fall for that. Whereas we didn't have that training. So like, there's like, that's some of still my downfall of like, like questioning myself. Like I know that I read the situation really right, but then I still will second guess myself. They don't have that. My kids don't have that. They're like, yeah, I know what's going on here. So that's a good thing, at least.
Something that occurred to me in a something you said, Jemima, in terms of having to make all of the decisions around whether to get your children vaccinated or not vaccinated. Is there a period of time where you have to work out what is actually bad for you, scientifically or socially, or things that have been tested, tried, that typical society would recognize that's not good for you? And did you have to separate that from what the group had told you was not good for you?
Yeah, that was a hard lesson. I'm still some of those are still, coming upon me. Um, Because some of these things, like when it's ingrained in you so deeply from the day you're born, you do it and you don't even realize you're doing it. So like one of the things I've been trying to do is question every process that I have. But I think the best thing though that like came out of leaving the group and everything is my researching skills are off the charts, and I'm probably Whispers the same. And I research everything. Anybody says something to me, I'm not just like, oh yeah, cool, wow. I'm like, okay, what was the source? Where did you get that from? Who wrote the article? Who told them? Who paid them to write the article? Those kind of things. Like I really get deep into my research about things and try to figure out what's good and what's not. I've always been like that since I left because I felt so deceived and lied to for my whole life, and I was like, that is not going to happen to me again. So I'm like I won't believe you until I know I can trust you, and that takes it's kind of hard.
Whisper, would you say that your process has been similar in differentiating between the fact of life and the fact of the group?
Yeah, absolutely. I I've said before, and I've talked about this, that I made the decision to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like, it's like there wasn't a point to try and pick and choose and say, well, this might be good or that might be. I'm like, no, if it's good, it'll come back to me. If it's the right thing to do, it'll come back to me. There's still things that I know that my kids and myself suffer from, that I can still lay at the feet of the horrible way that we were raised, like especially when it comes to like mental health and physical health and things like that, like just that absolute neglect and dismissal of those issues. I still have a hard time not losing it when I think about like because I have an autistic son, and I think about like what he went through in the early years of his life, because I had no idea. Like autism was something made up by the evil, like whatever, and so the things that he went through the first like years of his life, just simply because I had no idea even what was going on. So I when as I started seeing those kind of things going on, I was like, yeah, even if I think I know what's going on, I'm going to I'm going to go back and research it. We've been very lucky that we have the internet available to us right at the time when we were leaving. The internet was becoming a thing that we could research on, and that's been wonderful to have.
And I imagine that your podcast, the Butterflies and Bravery podcast, has been that tool for others who have found your show, who have tuned in, who have listened to two friends who, against all odds, have managed to maintain a friendship which has flourished. You support each other, and now you are building this platform. If you had to suggest an episode for new listeners to start with, Jemima, which episode do you think you would recommend from the Butterflies and Bravery catalogue?
Ooh, that's a hard one. I suppose it would kind of depend on what the listener was looking for, because there's a lot of variety on the podcast. Like there's you're going to cry for 45 minutes ones, and then there's other ones where you're just going to laugh your butt off the whole time. So it's hard to kind of choose. But one of my favorite episodes with a guest is the one where we had Beth Machinair, who was a therapist. It's called The Crocodile Closest to the Boat. The reason why that's one of my favorite episodes is because she gives a lot of insight into some psychoeducation and pointers like that about mental health. And so that one was very impactful for me. And then another one I really like is Paradoxical Healing, mostly because that was one of the biggest sort of healing modalities that I've learned from somebody that was on the podcast that I was unaware of, and that it's helped me. I can't even tell you how much. Tremendously. Paradoxical intention, just real quick, if anybody doesn't know, is pretty much just leaning into whatever the terriblest thing is that's happening to you. Like I just go to the worst case scenario and I make peace with it. And then I know that if it happens, I've already mentally made peace with it. And then it kind of just leaves, like it goes from here to like, okay, you know what? This is the very worst case scenario. And if that happens, then I will deal with it.
That is an amazing experience to have, where you invite somebody onto your show and they they end up giving you the experience where your life is changed. I think that's amazing. I had somebody come. I sat down to talk with a friend the other day about some difficulties that I've been having, and I was frustrated because I couldn't find an answer. I was just like, how do I solve this problem? And she said, radical acceptance, and that is all you can do. And I was just like, what do you mean? And she was like, radically accept that there is nothing you can do and move on from that. And I was just like, oh, that's tough. And she was like, and sometimes you just have to do it. And I feel like this kind of feels a bit like that, you know, this is the worst thing that could happen to me. I accept that it might happen. I can't fix this problem. I accept that some things just are this way. And it's a really difficult thing, but I'm kind of warming to the idea now. And so those little tidbits of wise advice are always welcomed. Whisper, is it similar recommendations for Butterflies and Bravery episodes that you would give, or do you have your own recommendations?
Well, for almost every single one of our guests are usually born-ins, because we believe it's very clear that it's a completely different, experience, from people that joined and then people that were born in. So for that reason, like if someone who was born in and is trying to understand themselves a little bit more, I would definitely start with the episode with Dr. Yanya Lalich. She talks about some really, really, really important things. She introduces bounded choice, which is like a really powerful concept that most of us hadn't understood before. And then the rest is just like Jemima was saying, what are you kind of looking for if you want to learn a little bit more about like what life was like in the Children of God, like the story ones where it's mainly Jemima and I telling, about our history and our past, that, like that you're going to learn a little bit more that way. We've also had, like Jemima said, we've had some really wonderful, amazing, incredible guests that we learn something every single time. Like I never feel like we're giving out advice ever. Like I'm always the one, like we're getting the advice. Like that's pretty much our role on there. Okay, we're a mess. Please give us advice. That's our role in the podcast. That's pretty much what we are on there. So we've had some really great guests for that reason.
But also the last podcast that we just did is one of my favorite concepts also. I don't want to give it away, so you should probably just go to our website and look. No.
It's a powerful show with an amazing concept and two best friends hosting it. Do you get feedback and do you get people contacting you about the experiences that they have listening to your show?
Yes, we have. We've actually gotten quite a bit of feedback. A lot of it is people messaging us, trying to make sense of their own situations, and people that are just recently coming to these sort of places where they're starting to question and starting to realize like, okay, whoa, there's a lot going on up here that I need to address. And so, yeah, I lost my train of thought.
No, that's amazing.
Yeah,
That's amazing. I love hearing the feedback that people get from putting out their content, because it helps to motivate, especially when things get tough. And I can only begin to imagine, especially when you are feeling particularly triggered or tired from revisiting certain subject matter, and you really just think about not interacting with it. Sometimes maybe taking a break is the best thing, but I find when I am getting the kind of the tingles of burnout, that just a positive email or review of the show or something can just completely change my frame of mind and the way I feel about things. So it's just wonderful to be surrounded by fellow content creators that have those experiences of receiving those positive messages as well.
I know we only wish that we could do so much more. Both of us work, I've got 2 jobs. Jemima's got a couple as
Wow.
well. So we have 2 full, most of we're working full time, and then and so we do this completely on the side, and out of our own pocket. So it's not always we can give the a kind of a time and attention to not only the podcast itself, but to our listeners and to the people that reach out to us. Like that would be my dream, to be able to do more for the people that do reach out to us. But I guess Rome wasn't built in a day. Little by little, we're getting through.
I think there's a kind of insight into that super empathy and super sympathy that you were talking about earlier on in this conversation, because I imagine that some might argue the platform itself, when you're both handling multiple jobs, is a huge thing in itself. And so I don't take lightly you giving me your time today to come back onto the Cult Vault podcast. Jemima, who's still in her workplace, talking to us from a room somewhere where she has stationed herself for this talk. So I appreciate both of you so much for coming to join me today to help with this fundraiser for a UK-based charity, where individuals who are leaving cults or who have been victimized by coercive control can find some support. We have some people in the chat. James says, and Sue, who is over here in the UK, says good morning. I was talking to her before she went to bed, so she's been to bed. She's had a night's sleep, and now she's awake again. Ruth says, Whisper and Jemima, thank you for sharing your stories. Maria says, thank you, Whisper Wind and Jemima L. Faris. You will never realize the far-reaching impact you have had and the lives you have saved.
Oh,
There's one of those
so
really
sweet.
beautiful messages. Isn't that so wonderful?
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
my goodness. So thank you both so much for joining me this evening, this morning, some time of the day. Could one of you please tell the listeners where they can find your podcast?
Whisper, I'm too crying.
So am I. Well, you can find us, Butterflies and Bravery, on anywhere that you stream, your podcasts, or on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, any platform like that. We have a website, butterfliesandbravery.com, that you can always visit as well. And we have, we've got a bit of a presence here and there on social media when we get to it.
That's fantastic. I've just put the link in the chat as well for anybody that wants to check out that website.
Thank
And
you
the
so much.
cultvaultpodcast.com. I made a page for this stream that has everyone's pictures and bios and links and things. So if you want to revisit anything that we've talked about in this stream, you can find everybody's information on my website as well. And I will leave that page up. That will just stay up now. So people will be able to find all of your work going forward. If anybody listens back to this stream after we are allowed back on YouTube for banning me for a week. Thank you very much. So thank you, ladies, both so much.
Thank
I
you
really
so
hope that
much.
you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you
Thank you.
Take
for
care.
having
Bye
us.
bye
Get some rest.
bye. Oh my goodness, we did it. Oh gosh.